Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Murphy's Law. It is actually episode 31, and we're live today. Why are we live? Well, a couple of reasons. This one in particular was more than a regular episode, but less than two. It's interesting, but first I want to say, hey, everybody, thank you for joining me live. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat, but I'm also going to want to try and swing through here because I've got a lot of clips to go through. So today, it's a tale of two Phils. Really a tale of two calls. For the last 2 weeks on Talk Heathen, this gentleman, Phil, has been calling in and wanting to talk about his approach to Christianity and kind of religion in general and belief. And I think that there are places that I could have done better. I think there are places that we did well. And I really kind of want to dive into it and talk about it a little bit. So here we are. This is the platform for it. So let's start off by introducing Phil. Phil, in North Carolina, you're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about? So this was season 4, episode 32 for people who are watching in the future. Also, I have links to all of the videos down underneath in the description for this one. So if you want to watch the thing in its entirety, you're absolutely welcome to. It's down in the description. So Phil, when he first called in, we have the view of what the callers want. The call screeners give us a brief synopsis of what the callers want to talk about so we can choose which ones and in what order we want to take them. And this time it said that this person wanted to give a defense of cafeteria Christians, which was interesting. And actually, I actually asked him, let's take a look. People who have not been religious. Phil, do you want to describe what a cafeteria Christian is?
Well, I only got introduced to it from you guys.
Yeah. So I didn't think that was a thing. When I went to church, cafeteria Christian or cherry picking, it was this idea that there were people who only wanted to take out of the Bible what they wanted and didn't like something, so they just kind of left it out. And they were maligned at my church. And I know a lot of people who would leave churches and seek other congregations because, this one left out this uncomfortable piece. And so when I would talk about cafeteria Christians, it's kind of the term that I'm used to hearing when I think about people who pick and choose parts of the Bible that they want to discuss. And so it kind of, it confused the heck out of me why somebody would want to talk about it. And so when he said, no, I learned about this term from you, I'm like, oh no. Okay. Let's talk about it. So this is how he begins.
85% even now with all the information, even looking at all the information that we see in the Bible and the holy books and the ridiculousness of it, and people still say yes.
85% of people see it and still believe it. They see all of the ridiculousness and yet they still believe. And so as a host, the first thing in my mind is, okay, this looks like ad populum. And I actually give a response. My mom told me as a child, if all of your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? Which I thought would be the best way to kind of describe where the problem is with that. I thought that what he was saying was that there are all of these people who believe, so there's got to be something to it. And I definitely know that I've talked to lots of people who've presented that argument. And turns out, when he calls the next time, we'll actually get into it, but I wasn't exactly right. I could have listened better. And so watching this back, I realized, I definitely think he could have communicated better, but I think I could have listened better as a host. And so he starts going on and kind of adding on to this.
They're pushed to something that's a little bit more benign, or they could believe in that. It'd be a much better existence for both of us.
Okay, so what he's saying here, and mind you, I am clipping it very, very small because I really, I've been caught by the algorithm, and I know that this falls under fair use, but the YouTube algorithm does not like seeing large clips of other shows and places, so I'm being very selective with my clips. But essentially what he's saying is that all of these people believe, 85% of people believe something, and it can be really dangerous. And so if we could just push them to believe something a little more benign, maybe that would be okay. And he adds on to that.
We all pick and choose. That's why you have so many denominations. So my thing is, can we decide on a basis of picking and choosing that is better?
You know, to be honest, I get it. You know, when I was coming out of my faith, that was one of the things that I thought, well, maybe the Christianity that I believe just doesn't have it exactly right, because, you know, this feeling that I have about God, you know, God can't be this big of a monster. I mean, I'm surely hell must have been made up by people. You know, of course God would love LGBTQIA plus people. You know, of course God wouldn't say to stone your children. Of course God wouldn't demand blood sacrifice in the Old Testament. And so you start to kind of fashion your own God. And I was there. And I know for a lot of you people watching, you recognize that you were there too. And so it's interesting. V actually had a response. I see V in the chat, by the way. Hello. V had a response. It's right here.
By saying, okay, you can have some unfounded beliefs that you don't need to back up with evidence. That opens up the gate to any belief that they want that they can then hold without evidence.
Exactly. You see, Philip was taking a pragmatic approach, and I'm going to bring this up time and time again during this episode. If you want to talk about pragmatism versus correspondence, right? Those are two of multiple different theories of truth. And so the correspondence theory of truth essentially says that what is truth? Truth is what corresponds to reality. That's how we determine what is true. But there are other competing definitions for theories for truth. One of them is the pragmatic theory of truth. And I knew I wasn't going to get it right, so I wrote it down. And it holds that a proposition is true if it is useful to believe. And that definitely feels like what he's saying here. Is well, it's useful to people, and because of that, then we should move forward with it. And I feel like we were talking past each other at this point, because V and I in this episode, we're focused on, is it true? And Phil is focused on, is it useful? And I think those are two very different things. I'll dive a little bit more into what's useful and not useful, and what is true a little bit later, but I kind of want to keep the pace of where we're going. So we ended the call very amicably.
Yeah, I'll call back, but I really appreciated the conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, we appreciate it too. Sure. Phil, do me a favor, man. Call earlier. Yes, please. Phil called so late in the episode that we weren't able to spend as much time as we would have liked to spend with him. And because of that, yeah, we asked him to call back the next week. And this last Sunday, if you're watching this live, if you're not watching this live, the next weekend, Phil called back. And I was on, with Trey Crowder. So here's that intro. Let's talk to Phil in North Carolina. Phil, you're live with Eric and Trey. What would you like to talk about? All right. So he called back 2 weeks in a row, and I've got to tell you, he did something that not a lot of callers do. He went back and watched the episode and listened and thought about it. And he had a couple of thoughts that, okay, I was not ready for, I did not expect, but I appreciate the feedback regardless. His first piece before he wanted to talk about the subject at hand was he was upset.
You are clutching your head in exasperation. V is aggressively rolling her eyes.
Well, hold on. What's he talking about? It took me a second to realize. He was talking about the thumbnail for that episode. Let me pull that up here. the bandwagon. Is that how I felt about him while I was talking to him? No. But the ACA has an amazing crew who clips, does thumbnails and all of that. And they went on, and after they watched the clip, they decided, okay, it looks like a lot of this conversation had to do with, the ad populum argument. And just so I'm clear, if I haven't said it yet, ad populum is the argument from popularity. Basically, if enough people believe it, then it must be true. And so I'm going to actually keep this up here. Oh, this one right over here. There we go. And I'm going to play that again because his description that's pretty spot on.
You are clutching your head in exasperation. V is aggressively rolling her eyes.
Oh, are you talking about the thumbnails?
Yeah, man.
Oh.
Wasn't too happy about that.
That's fair. So, okay, I addressed it. We move forward. And mind you, by the way, this is an example of one of the things that gets left on the cutting room floor when I'm prepping for an episode of Murphy's Law. But I wanted this to be different. I wanted this episode to be something where I can actually touch base and be real. That's why I'm doing this live. And plus, I knew that this was going to take a whole lot longer than a regular episode of Murphy's Law. And because of that, I thought, you know what, let's just dive in and do something different. So, let's go on and go to what he has to say, because he wanted to clarify a bit from the last call. And does it feel like we're tracking back? Yes, but I want to hold this up. Phil, if you ever watch this video, this is exemplary. I love that you went back and watched it. Whether we agree or not, the fact that you went back and watched it is wonderful.
And I wanted to be sure that I had and clear up something really quickly with an ad populum claim, which is what I kind of started with in saying that 85% of the world believes in a God.
Yeah, I'm glad he wanted to talk about it. And he went on. He actually said, you know what, I won't put words in his mouth. I'll just have him say it.
There was more of a commentary on like the human condition and not whether or not there was a God or not.
Okay. So I'm going to be pointing out a shift here, but I want to kind of put a pin in this so that you can follow with me. And that is that, I'm not saying whether or not the God exists. I'm just saying a thing. And then after a little while, building up and, okay, God exists. So for those of us who have a lot of practice with this, while I appreciate that, I'm sure internally he was like, okay, I wanted to clarify this was not me saying that if it's popular, it's true. But I'm mentally putting a pin in it, right? I'm getting ready just in case we wind up going back to those waters. So he starts talking about why he believes that this is true. And he actually references another YouTuber, or he's not a YouTuber. You know what? I didn't put the clip in here, which makes me really sad. But it's John Shelby Spong, who's a pastor. And the interesting thing about him is he's really, really upset that people are taking the Bible literally. I watched a video of him being really, really upset that people would look at the Jonah story and believe that's true. Of course it's metaphor, and I got to admit, taking down, thank you, Casa Mufasa. Appreciate the live chat. Yay. That's very nice. Sorry. Moving on. So I like where it's going, so now I'm in this weird position where I see somebody who is moving away from these fundamentalist, ideas, and maybe he didn't have them, but his whole gist is he's wanting to move towards a kinder, gentler society. And so he starts saying, okay, well, how can I justify this religious belief? Or at least that's where I think he's going with this. And so he starts to give his version of history.
Well, the Jesus was in a very barbaric, tribal society. and that his decision to love those who wanted to do him wrong, love those that were different, was radical, revolutionary.
Okay, so this got brought to my attention after the fact. I was so interested in clarifying several different points of his that there's a big piece that I left off. I'll show you which part I did talk about. I did respond here. Civilizations that were already growing. You already had, the Roman government that was there and established. You already had a Jewish community there. But that's kind of nitpicking. I think that the piece that Okay, so I go, okay, yes, there was society already. The idea that Jesus somehow, invented empathy, but I didn't go the extra step, right? I started to say, yeah, no, you have these other societies. And in my mind, I thought I responded to it. But really what I should have said is, Philip, Jesus did not invent empathy. That's not a thing. The only reason that those societies exist in the first place, Santi, the same, thank you for your donation. The only reason that those societies exist in the first place is because you have people who were able to behave in an empathetic way and build up this civilization together. And so, no, the idea that everybody, oh, this empathy thing, that's interesting and new and radical. No, it's not. I love the idea, that he's wanting to make this fit in a very positive way, but that doesn't mean that you can rewrite history. It doesn't. So we get to the crux of his argument.
I don't care if you believe in the cabbage, but if you believe in gay rights and you believe that and that brings you closer to believing that women are equal, who cares?
Who cares? And what's funny is during this whole call, Trey is actually following along for a really important part of it. And that is that we don't have to believe everything to be allies, right? We don't have to believe in all the same things. If you are a liberal Christian who is pro-gay rights, then cool. We can be allies in making sure that LGBTQ people have the ability to vote and are, seeing protection under the law. Right? If we are aligned on some things, then I really don't have a problem with, allying and trying to make a difference. And I think that's where he was going. And I know Trey went in with that too. And he was just like, you know what? Yeah. If we can just build a better world, that's great. But there's another step here. The other step is just because you're not harming anyone, or just because we can be allies on some things, doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with you on everything. That's just, if I did, I would be a Christian. So why don't I? Well, because because of the evidence that I've evaluated and the tools that I use to evaluate that evidence. And to the best of my knowledge, we're just not there. In fact, I responded very similarly here. What does it matter if it's true? It matters because I think that you have it in you, Phil, to have all of this information. And even if there was no God, you would still have a reason to be a good person. And I think that should be true for everyone. Give them the tools so that they can make an informed decision. But I don't think that I should make the decision for them. Right. And so just to be absolutely clear, I'll say it again. And I don't know how many ways I can say it until people kind of get the difference here. And the difference is there's the concept of the noble lie, that it would just be better for people to believe something, even if it's not true. I think it was Freud who even said, if everybody, felt better by believing, then everybody should believe, because we'd have a better society that way. Well, I think that's incredibly condescending. The next step is, are you believing things for the right reasons? Before, in the first call, had the right answer.
By
Here.
saying, okay, you can have some unfounded beliefs that you don't need to back up with evidence. That opens up the gate to any belief that they want that they can then hold without evidence.
Exactly. So what evidence do you have? Because if we say, why do you believe what you believe? And the other person says, well, what's the harm? Who cares? There's the shift. Remember, we put a pin in that? There's the shift. It's no longer, is it true? Is it hurtful? I don't care if it's hurtful. The question was, is it true? The fact is there are a lot of painful truths. And the fact that it's painful doesn't make it less the case that we live in the world where there is pain and suffering, there's starvation, there's war. Just because it's not, it doesn't make you feel good, does that mean that pain and starvation and war and disease, that those things aren't real? No, of course not. But we need to actually recognize that those things are real. We need to recognize the truth of the world that we're in if we're going to combat that disease, if we're going to combat the pain and suffering that we see in the world. We have to recognize it. And so I actually used as an example in that last call, this last weekend with Trey, I said, I knew someone who was taken advantage of when they were ill and they're no longer alive. Did they have, was it a God belief? No, it was woo. It was pseudo spiritual mumbo jumbo that there was this line in their life. And the line was, I just believe this, so leave me alone. Who's it hurting? It hurt you, dude. It hurt everyone in your life who now has to live that life without you, and you could have fixed it. That's what it hurt. That's why it matters. So give them the tools. Let them see the suffering in the world. Let them see, in this case, let them see, hey, there's not actually a good reason to believe in this God. And give them the opportunity to rise to the occasion and still show that they can be good people. Does that mean that everyone will? No. But if I were to make a decision based off of the lowest common denominator, that'd be like a teacher, going, well, not everybody's going to ace my class, so I'm just going to stop giving out A's. Why am I going to help anyone if some people aren't going to get all the way there? Give them the benefit of the doubt and at least try. At least that's the goal there. And so I'm actually going to end with this clip here.
I don't think it's a question of, they just don't have the evidence. I think that religion satisfies some very deep things.
I agree. I think it feels good to hear that you're going to see your loved ones again after you die. I think it feels good to hear that there's some kind of cosmic justice, that the people who do terrible things in this life will somehow pay for their crimes if they didn't get to while they were alive. I get it. But just because there's satisfaction there, again, doesn't mean that that's a justification. Accepting that is true. I gave the example. If I told you I was going to give you $1 million tomorrow, would that make you feel good? Yeah. But if I didn't actually do it, that matters. But I get, he was starting, and I saw that, and I thought it was an ad populum argument. In fact, we, threw together the bandwagon, and I totally understand at this point. Watching it now, I go, okay, maybe it wasn't communicated clearly, but we got past it. But we still did circle around to the shift. And I want to point it out. That's the whole reason, is I want to point this out. When I ask you, is this true? If the response is, who's it hurting? I'm not hurting anyone. It's not an answer. It's just a dodge. Phil, I do hope you watch this, because I would love to continue the conversation with you. But I do recognize this as a dodge. And I think you can do better. You went back and watched through the episode. And I'd love to continue the conversation. for anybody else who's called in and is wondering, hey, do Eric and V and Jenna, do they go back and actually watch the episodes that they were on? Yeah, we do. And we want to do our best to get better. And so, well, here's where we get to show you. You get to see some of that inside, behind the curtain, that we are going back and we are watching. So that said, it has been a half-hour long episode, which is way longer than usual, but I am so glad to see all of you here. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to be putting an end card afterwards, so let's see if this will make sense after the fact. Click here to subscribe. Click here if you want to watch other episodes of Murphy's Law, and click here if you want to watch my conversations with Christian apologists. Until next time, take care, everybody.